Mr. Lucas.
Slowly but surely, Chairman, you're going to get me trained, and I appreciate your patience. So I'll turn to the entire panel for my first question. In your testimony, you've all made different recommendations for the best way to distribute emergency supplemental funds to local fire departments. How do you recommend Congress balance the speed of getting the funds out the door with making sure resources are going where they're needed the most in a fair process? And any of the three?
Well,
I'll step into that.
I can certainly speak for the Volunteer Fire Service. This grant program, the grant programs have been administered by the U.S. Fire Administration through FEMA. They've worked remarkably well the last 18 years since we've had these programs in place. The reason that they work so well is that we do peer reviews. In other words, other firefighters actually sit in on the reviews of those grant applications, and that has worked amazingly well. We're sort of the experts in this field, and it's worked tremendously well. Now that they're able to do peer reviews in a remote setting, I think those are going to move fairly quickly.
And I'll add from the International Association of Fire Chiefs, we truly support the current, as Steve said, the current AFG and SAFER programs. The process by way that's been delivered, it's a very clear and transparent process that there's no middle agency, no middle person. The funds go directly from fire departments, from the federal government directly to fire departments. There is a very transparent and clear process with that, with the peer review process that Steve spoke of. And it has been a proven system that has worked for multiple years, 18 years or so. And we support that process wholeheartedly.
Ranking Member Lucas, I don't have anything to add other than what my fellow panelists have already said.
Absolutely. And with that, Mr. McGee, I would note it's always nice to have a fellow Oklahoman on the panel. And as you're well aware of, whether in the last few days, whether it's Kingfisher County, Alfalfa County, Greer County, Dewey County, Major County, we've had an ongoing set of fire challenges out in the countryside.
Yes.
You're well aware of that. And as you also know, I represent essentially the northwest half of the great state of Oklahoma, with many small volunteer fire and EMS departments. And although we've been very fortunate to have, compared to the rest of the country, a limited number of cases of COVID-19 in the 3rd District of Oklahoma, what have been the particular challenges for Oklahoma's rural firefighters during this pandemic? Because we've not faced anything quite like this in my lifetime.
Sure. Thank you very much for the question. You're right. We haven't faced anything like this in our lifetimes, and it has, this pandemic has posed particular challenges to fire and EMS departments, regardless of their size. What we found so far, as this pandemic has unfolded in front of us, is the availability of PPE varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Some fire departments are better supplied than others. Some have sufficient PPE, others do not. And we find that holds true whether it's in a rural setting, a volunteer setting, a combination setting, or a metropolitan fire department. What goes along with this difficulty in obtaining PPE in those areas where it is difficult is response protocols. Fire departments, regardless of size or location, have had to develop protocols on the fly. That holds true for volunteers, combination departments, and career departments. But firefighters have done what we've always done. We adapt to the situation and respond as best we can given the circumstances. Some departments are better situated than others, and I think that comes down to a local leadership or a local jurisdiction issue. But that's also why funding it to allow for the proper equipment and staffing is so important. For instance, in Stillwater, firefighters today are not permitted to wear N95 masks on a daily basis. Rather, they are mandated to wear a surgical mask, which we know has a limited application. And they also are not afforded the appropriate number of Tyvek suits. They are only allotted a certain number per rig. And what we find, Congressman, is these kinds of situations are all over the map, and it depends on which particular fire department you're talking about. but those kinds of situations are not uncommon all across the state.
Mr. Hirsch, if you wouldn't mind following up, how does that track with what you're seeing in the volunteer departments nationwide?
I think very similar. Interestingly enough, of course, many of our fire departments in the southwest part of Kansas are working hand in hand with departments in northwest Oklahoma. They cross those lines with some frequency.
Oh, yes.
Because fires don't seem to know where the state line is. But, things just as simple, I guess, that would come to my mind would be, when rural fire departments are responding to motor vehicle accidents out on the roadways, we don't know whether someone's got COVID or not. So we have to take the proper precautions when we arrive on those scenes. And that's been a challenge for a lot of departments, making sure that we have appropriate PPE. We've been very fortunate to not have barely any cases in our particular region, but we can never let our guard down, because the primary thing is to protect our people. Because these, with the volunteers, and it doesn't matter whether you're in Oklahoma or Kansas or Massachusetts or Alaska, they're leaving their jobs during the daytime, they're leaving their families at night, and they're running the risk that they bring it home to their families. And career people the same, but they're also running the risk that they may not have a job if they contract this stuff, or worse yet, and things that we've faced, very small departments, if you get one or two that contract COVID-19, all of a sudden you've got a fire department or an ambulance agency that are completely shut down. It's a big concern and a big fear.
Absolutely, Mr. Hirsch. Absolutely. With that, Madam Chair, I appreciate the insights of our witnesses, and I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr.